She had 72 hours to live, and she didn't even know it yet. Vivian was 7 months pregnant when she took one bite of her mother-in-law's homemade gravy and tasted something that made her blood run cold. Bitter. Metallic. Wrong. What Dorothea didn't know, Vivian wasn't just a pregnant woman she could push around. She was an FBI agent who had spent 2 years undercover with the Russian mafia. She had tasted poison before. That single spoonful of gravy would unravel 40 years of dark family secrets, expose 3 hidden murders, and force Vivian to choose between her marriage and her survival. What happens when a predator picks the wrong prey? This is the story of a woman who trusted her gut when everyone, including her own husband, called her crazy. And by the end, she didn't just survive. She brought down a monster hiding in plain sight. Stay with me, because this story proves that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while serving you poison. If you've ever had a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong, but everyone around you said you were imagining things, this story is for you. It's about trusting yourself when no one else will, and fighting back when someone tries to take everything from you. The words hung in the air of the grand dining room. Vivian was 7 months pregnant and exhausted after closing a tough kidnapping case. She would have preferred to be home in her pajamas, but her husband, Grant, had begged her to come. Now she was squeezed into a maternity dress at a table, surrounded by his perfect, judgmental family. "Thank you, Dorothea," Vivian said with a warm smile. Her mother-in-law's smile never reached her eyes. For 3 years, Dorothea had mastered the art of kindness that felt like a threat. The gravy boat landed in front of Vivian. "I used a new recipe," Dorothea announced. "You need your strength. Growing my grandchild takes so much out of a woman." Vivian noticed the emphasis on my grandchild, as if she were just a vessel. She had learned to ignore these small slights, but tonight felt different. Vivian poured the rich, dark gravy over her potatoes. A strange metallic smell hid beneath the herbs. Across the table, Grant smiled, completely unaware. Vivian lifted her fork and took the first bite. It was bitter and wrong. Years of FBI training took over instantly. She recognized poison profiles the way a chef knows spices. This was not a kitchen herb. She swallowed the tiny amount and took another small bite to avoid suspicion. Across the table, Dorothea watched her with the cold anticipation of a spider watching a fly. Vivian squeezed her husband's hand under the table, their secret signal. "I need to use the restroom," she announced, blaming the baby. The family laughed politely. "Of course, dear," Dorothea said, her smile fixed. "We will save your plate." Vivian walked calmly down the hall, past generations of Hartwell family portraits hanging on the wall. After 3 years of marriage, she still felt like a temporary guest. Once inside the bathroom, she locked the door and moved fast. She spit the food into the toilet and forced herself to throw up what she had swallowed. Her hands trembled as she pulled a small evidence bag from her purse. A habit from her undercover days. She scraped the residue from her tongue, sealed it in the bag, and wrote the date and time. In the mirror, she saw the face of a woman who had just realized the unthinkable. Her mother-in-law had tried to poison her. The thought was insane. Dorothea was controlling and manipulative, but a murderer. Yet her FBI instincts, the ones that had kept her alive for years, were screaming a warning. She trusted those instincts completely. Vivian tucked the evidence bag away, fixed her lipstick, and practiced a calm smile. Then, she walked steadily back to the dining room. The conversation at the dinner table was about Preston's big promotion, but Vivian could only stare at her plate. 7 months pregnant, she felt like a stranger in her own body, and now, at this table, she felt like an imposter. The perfectly arranged turkey and mashed potatoes looked delicious, but she couldn't bring herself to eat. Instead, she pushed the food around, a trick she learned as a child to create the illusion of eating. Her mother-in-law, Dorothea, watched her with a satisfied smile. Vivian knew that look all too well from her 4 years studying psychopaths for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The sweet voice, asking about the gravy, was a performance. Underneath the doting mother-in-law act was something cold and calculated. When her husband Grant squeezed her hand under the table, asking if she was okay, she saw the family portrait over the fireplace. After 3 years of marriage, her face was still missing. She lied and said everything was fine, but the rest of the dinner was a blur of anxiety. She refused the pumpkin pie and apple crumble, blaming it on morning sickness. Grant looked worried, but he accepted her excuse. Finally, at 9:30, she convinced him it was time to go home. In the car, Grant asked if she was all right, mentioning that she had been quiet all night. Vivian just said she was tired from a recent case. He didn't understand that love could be a weapon, or that the people who claim to care the most are often the ones who cause the most harm. As Christmas music played on the radio, Vivian pressed a hand to her stomach. Feeling her baby move, she made a silent promise to protect her child, no matter what it took. That night, sleep was impossible. Grant slept peacefully beside her, but Vivian's mind was racing. At 2:14 in the morning, she slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen. She sat in the dark, the cold tile floor beneath her bare feet. The evidence bag she had secretly collected from her dinner plate sat in her purse, a silent threat waiting to be confirmed. She finally picked up her phone and searched for the taste of ethylene glycol. The results were terrifying. Sweet at first, then bitter. It was often described as antifreeze. A second search for antifreeze poisoning symptoms listed nausea, seizures, coma, and death. Her hands trembled as she typed one last search, its effect on an unborn baby. The words on the screen were a nightmare. Fetal death, spontaneous abortion, birth defects. She finally went back to bed, but didn't sleep until the sun rose. On Black Friday morning, Grant kissed her goodbye before leaving to play golf with his brother. By 9:15, Vivian was 2 hours outside the city, pulling into the parking lot of the unremarkable building that housed the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office. Her old partner, Margot Dawson, was waiting for her in their usual spot in the parking garage, a camera blind spot. Margot took one look at her and said, "You look like hell." Vivian knew she couldn't hide anything from her. "I need the lab," she said, "and it has to be off the books." Margot didn't ask any questions. She just nodded. They walked through the quiet back hallways of the building. The lab was mostly empty because of the holiday. Dr. Lydia Brennan was the only one there, running samples for a counterfeiting case. She looked up and smiled, noticing Vivian's stomach. "Congratulations," she said. 7 months along. Is it a boy or a girl?" Vivian managed a weak smile and replied, "A girl." Imagine your own mother-in-law trying to kill you at Thanksgiving dinner. That's the nightmare my friend Vivian found herself in. This is a story about trusting your gut when something feels terribly wrong, and fighting back when someone tries to take everything from you. Vivian walked into her friend Lydia's lab on a holiday, holding a plastic bag with a brownish smear inside. She needed an off-the-record analysis. Lydia, a scientist, asked what she was looking for. Vivian's answer was chilling. "Poison," she said. "I think it's antifreeze, and I think it was in my Thanksgiving dinner." The silence in the lab felt heavy. Lydia promised preliminary results in just 4 hours. While she waited, Vivian sat with her partner, Margot, trying to explain the impossible. "My mother-in-law, Dorothea, made a special gravy just for me." Vivian's voice was steady, but her words painted a scary picture. In 3 years, Dorothea has never once asked what I like. But yesterday, she made my supposed favorite dish and watched me eat every single bite. Margot was skeptical, saying strange behavior was not evidence. But Vivian knew better. She had spent 2 years undercover with criminals who used this exact method. The bitter taste hiding under the herbs was a taste she recognized. She explained that antifreeze was a silent killer, often mistaken for natural causes. I'm not saying she tried to poison me, Vivian clarified. I'm saying I need proof before I decide what to do next. Her friend squeezed her hand, promising they would face this together. The call came a few hours later. Vivian sat in her car, her mind racing with doubt. Maybe she was just being paranoid. But when she answered her phone, the fear in Lydia's voice confirmed her worst suspicions. It's ethylene glycol, Lydia said. Antifreeze. The dose was high enough to cause kidney failure within 72 hours. Vivian felt the world tilt as she gripped her steering wheel. And the baby, she asked. Lydia's voice grew soft. In a pregnant woman, the effects would be faster. It would cause a miscarriage within 48 hours. Who gave this to you, Vivian? Lydia asked, her voice filled with alarm. My family, Vivian whispered. The proof was undeniable. Her mother-in-law had tried to murder her and her unborn child. She called her husband, Grant, her voice completely calm. Years of FBI training had taught her to lock her emotions away in a crisis. When Grant answered, he sounded happy and relaxed after a day of golfing. She told him they needed to talk, that it was important. Grant suggested they go to his mom's house for leftovers, which made a bitter laugh escape Vivian's lips. No, Grant, it cannot wait, she said, her voice like shattered glass. He could hear the panic now. Please, just come home, she pleaded, then hung up. In her car, she stared at the lab report. Dorothea Hartwell, the perfect society woman and loving grandmother-to-be, was a monster. But she had failed. Vivian was alive, and the baby was alive. She placed a hand on her belly and felt a tiny kick, a small wave of life. I will protect you, she whispered. I promise. She knew this was just the beginning. The truth would unravel her entire life, her marriage, and the family she thought she knew. But first, she had to go home and see whose side her husband would choose. When Grant walked in, he found Vivian sitting in the dark living room. On the coffee table in front of her was the lab report and the evidence bag. The proof of his mother's betrayal was laid out for him to see. Why are you sitting in the dark? He asked, reaching for the light. Leave it, she commanded. Her tone stopped him cold. He looked from her face to the folder on the table. Sit down, Grant. We need to talk. Sit down, Grant. His eyes fixed on the evidence folder sitting on the coffee table. What is all of this? Vivian took a steadying breath. There was no gentle way to say it, only the truth. At Thanksgiving dinner yesterday, your mother made a special gravy just for me. Grant nodded, remembering how excited she was. Vivian continued, I tasted something bitter. My training took over, so I took a sample. His confusion deepened. A sample of gravy? She pushed the lab report toward him. I had it tested today. The results showed ethylene glycol, antifreeze, enough to kill me and our unborn child within 72 hours. The paper trembled in his hand. He looked up, his eyes filled with disbelief. This is impossible. My mother would never do this. Grant? The test is certain. They ran it 3 separate times. He shot up from his chair and paced the room, running a hand through his hair. There must be a mistake, he pleaded. Maybe the gravy was contaminated somehow. Antifreeze does not just appear in food by accident, Grant. Someone put it in the gravy that only I was served, he shouted. Not my mother. Vivian remained calm. I am a federal agent. This is my professional conclusion. I analyze facts for a living, and the facts show your mother tried to murder me. He let out a sharp, ugly laugh. Do you realize how insane you sound? I hear myself telling you that someone put poison in my food, she replied, her voice dangerously quiet. And I am asking you to consider that it was the person who made it. Grant's voice cracked. You want me to believe my own mother tried to kill my wife and child? Yes. That is absolutely crazy, he shot back. The word hit her like a slap. Crazy. Don't you dare call me crazy. Then give me another explanation, Vivian challenged, standing to face him. Explain how antifreeze got into the gravy, only I ate. Explain why your mother watched my every bite. I have studied psychopaths for 4 years, Grant. I know a performance when I see one. Your mother is not the loving grandmother she pretends to be. He stared, torn between the woman he loved and the mother he had always trusted. Part of him knew she was right, but the other part refused to see it. I have to call her, he said finally. I need to hear her side of this. Vivian knew it was pointless to argue. He needed to hear the lie for himself. Fine, call her. Grant put the phone on speaker. Dorothea answered cheerfully. Grant? Darling, how was golf? Mom, I need to ask you about the gravy you made for Vivian. A tiny pause, then her voice came back, sweet as honey. Of course, sweetheart. I made it from scratch. Why? Vivian said it tasted strange. Strange? Dorothea sounded hurt. I worked so hard on it. I even got tips on what pregnant women enjoy. I just wanted it to be special for the mother of my grandchild. The silence on the line stretched after Grant told her about the test. Tested for what? Dorothea asked, her voice suddenly cool. Vivian spoke up. The test found ethylene glycol, antifreeze. After another long pause, Dorothea's tone became soft and concerned. Oh, Vivian, sweetheart, you must be mistaken. I would never hurt you or my first grandchild. Those labs make mistakes all the time. But Dorothea's voice was like silk covering steel. You are under so much stress with the pregnancy and your difficult job. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. We imagine threats that are not real. Grant was actually nodding, as if his mother's words were making perfect sense. My friend Patricia's daughter-in-law had a complete breakdown during her pregnancy, Dorothea continued, planting the seed of doubt. She started accusing everyone of trying to hurt her baby. She had to be hospitalized. Grant looked at Vivian, his face a mask of conflict. I think you need to rest, he said slowly. I do not need rest, Vivian said through clenched teeth. I need my husband to believe me. He could only say, I just do not believe my mother is capable of this. You do not know what she is capable of, Vivian whispered, her control finally breaking. That night, Vivian sat in her car, ready to leave. She could not stay with a man who chose his mother's lies over her. But as she gripped the wheel, the front door opened. It was Grant. He held up his phone, his face pale. I called her back, he said, his voice shaking. I asked her where she kept the antifreeze for her car. She told me she did not own any, but I know she does. I bought it for her last month. The lie, so small and stupid, had broken the spell. He finally saw the truth. I am so sorry, Vivian. Please come back inside. Together they would face the monster, and together they would protect their family. She was no longer just a terrified victim. The undercover agent she used to be had resurfaced. The woman who had survived impossible situations was now in control. She wasn't paranoid, and she wasn't crazy. The evidence did not lie. As Grant slowly sat down, his perfect life about to be destroyed, Vivian knew this was not an ending. It was the start of a war, and she was ready to fight. The lab report sat on the coffee table, a confirmation of her deepest fears. Vivian looked at her husband, Grant, sleeping peacefully in the glow of the television. He still looked like the boy she had fallen in love with, but his mother, Dorothea, had been trying to turn her into a proper Hartwell since their wedding day. Vivian now understood that was never a welcome, it was a threat. The report proved just how far her mother-in-law would go to get rid of her. Tomorrow, the fight would begin. Saturday morning, Grant was already gone, leaving a note that he went to his mom's house. Vivian knew he was getting their stories straight, letting his mother calm his doubts. She tossed the note and got to work. People do not just wake up and decide to commit murder. There is always a pattern. She started digging online. Dorothea May Hartwell was born into a middle-class family with no hint of ambition. That all changed in 1982 when 19-year-old Dorothea married Richard Hartwell, a wealthy real estate heir who was 41. A few years later, in 1987, Richard died of kidney failure. He was only 46. The official cause was natural, but Vivian felt a chill. The poison Dorothea used on her mimic's kidney failure. It was a terrifying coincidence. Vivian kept digging and found another one. In 1994, Dorothea's brother-in-law, James Manning, also died of organ failure at 46. His death was ruled natural, with no autopsy. Just 2 months earlier, he had denied Dorothea a family loan. Then she found David Porter, a board member at the Family Foundation. He died in 2003 after a short illness, also organ failure. Weeks before, he had voted against Dorothea's plans. 3 men who stood in her way were all dead. Vivian called her law partner, Margot. She told her she needed cold case files connected to the Hartwell family. She explained the pattern: 3 deaths, all looking like antifreeze, poisoning, all ruled natural. Her husband, her brother-in-law, and a business partner. Vivian paused, then added, "And now me. I am number 4. The line went silent for a moment before Margot whispered, "My God, Viv, your mother-in-law might be a serial killer." They met at a discreet coffee shop on Monday. Margot had found more victims, but these ones had survived. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were the stories of women who had gotten close to Grant. His college girlfriend was hospitalized with a mysterious illness and broke up with him right after. His fiancée before Vivian developed severe anxiety and called off the wedding just 3 months before the date. And where were they now? The college girlfriend was alive, but refused to talk about that time in her life. The fiancée, Samantha, was dead. She had taken her own life in 2015, 3 years after ending the engagement. The list went on. A nanny who raised Grant was fired after a debilitating illness. A maid, a gardener, a chef, all people who worked for the Hartwells, got sick and then left. The horrifying pattern was clear. Dorothea did not just eliminate threats. She systematically destroyed the lives of anyone she could not control. For 36 years, my mother-in-law has gotten away with murder. I stared at the folder, full of names of women connected to her, all silenced. Anyone who got too close to her sons, anyone who challenged her, she poisoned them. My coffee sat cold and forgotten. I'm not going to be the next name on her list, and I will protect my unborn child. But how do you convince a man that his own mother is a killer? Grant, my husband, thought I was having a breakdown, that pregnancy hormones were making me unstable. His mother even suggested I might need to be institutionalized. Margot, my friend, called him an idiot, but I knew it was more complicated. Dorothea had been manipulating him his entire life. He couldn't see the truth, so I knew what I had to do. I would build a case so solid that even a devoted son could not deny it. Later that night, Grant came home, smelling faintly of his mother's perfume. He said he had a client dinner, but he couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't push. Instead, I went to the nursery we had painted together, the one filled with gifts from a family I now realized was a web of secrets. I sat in the rocking chair, thinking of the women in my files. Jennifer, who suffered a mysterious illness. Samantha, whose panic attacks drove her to suicide. All of them. Casualties in Dorothea's quiet war. I thought of Caroline, my sister-in-law, a hollowed-out woman who never got pregnant after 6 years of marriage. What had Dorothea done to her? A kick from my baby brought me back. I am not crazy, I whispered, placing a hand on my belly. She is. We are going to stop her. Outside, a winter wind blew, but I felt a new sense of purpose. I had a case to build, and I was very good at my job. 6 days after Thanksgiving, Grant found the files. I had fallen asleep on the couch, leaving the folder on the kitchen table. I woke to the sound of papers slamming on the counter. "What is this?" he demanded. His face was flushed with anger as he held up a photo of an ex-girlfriend of his from 15 years ago. "You're investigating women I dated in college?" "I'm investigating a pattern," I said calmly. "A pattern of what?" he scoffed. "That my mother is secretly poisoning every woman who gets close to me?" "Yes," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "That is exactly what I'm saying." "You need professional help," he said, his voice cold. "This is not normal behavior. Ignoring the fact that your mother has murdered 3 people isn't normal either," I shot back. "There's no evidence, just your conspiracy theories. 3 people are dead, Grant." My voice finally broke. "All of them were connected to your mother, and all of them had symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. My father had kidney failure," he argued. "He was sick for years. He was a healthy 46-year-old man until he suddenly wasn't. Your Uncle James died because he was a drunk. He died 6 weeks after he voted against your mother in a business deal. David Porter was 52 and healthy, but he also opposed her on a foundation board and died just weeks later." Grant slammed his hand on the counter. "Stop it. I can't stop," I said, my voice dropping to a steely whisper. "She tried to kill me, Grant. She tried to kill our baby, and I am going to prove it." A thick silence filled the room. Then he spoke, and his words chilled me to the bone. "I spoke to my mother today." "About what?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "About you," he said. "About my wife accusing her of being a murderer." "You're manufacturing crimes out of paranoid fantasies," he said, echoing words I'd heard my whole life. The word paranoid hit me like a punch. This man, my husband, the father of my child, was choosing his mother over us. He was letting her convince him that I was the crazy one. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I possessed. "What?" "Get out of my house, now." I refuse to be gaslit by the man who promised to protect me. "You are always choosing her." For a moment, his face softened, and I saw the man I married, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by the face of Dorothea's son. Her husband promised to stand by her forever. That promise died when she accused his mother of being a murderer. He said he loved her, but claimed her obsession was destroying them. Then he packed a bag and left. As his car disappeared, Vivian stood alone, surrounded by files, proving a horrible truth he refused to see. This is the story of how one woman, abandoned by the person she trusted most, fought to expose an evil hidden in plain sight. She sat on the cold kitchen floor all night, her pregnant belly pressed against her knees. In the morning, her boss, Agent Russell Kincaid, called. He did not care that she was on maternity leave. He just said, "My office, now." Driving to the field office felt unreal. Her body moved on autopilot, while her mind reeled from her husband's betrayal and the dread of what was to come. Kincaid, a man everyone considered one of the good ones, told her to shut the door. He looked exhausted as he described an anonymous complaint. It accused an agent of using federal resources for a personal vendetta against a private citizen. Vivian's heart pounded, but her face showed nothing. The complaint specifically stated that an agent believed her mother-in-law was a serial killer and was manufacturing evidence. Dorothea had struck back. The complaint even included times and dates of her database access. Vivian met his gaze. She told him she had proof of multiple murders committed by Dorothea, including lab results showing poison in a gravy sample. Kincaid rubbed his temples, a man caught in an impossible situation. He said she was one of his best agents, but his hands were tied. He had to put her on administrative leave, while internal affairs investigated everything. If she was wrong, her career was over. Vivian looked at her boss and warned him that if she was right, another death would be on their conscience. He just told her to go home. The house felt enormous and silent without Grant. She stood in the nursery they had prepared together, looking at the crib under a mobile of stars and moons. The happy life she had only 6 months ago felt like a distant memory. Unable to sleep, she spent the night folding tiny baby clothes. There was a pink one from her strong mother, who taught her to always fight back. There was a yellow one from her friend Margot, the only person who believed her without question. And then there was a white cashmere outfit from Dorothea. It came with a smile that never reached her eyes. The expensive gift felt more like a threat than an act of love. She tossed the evidence into the trash can. Then, on Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on her door. Vivian expected no one. She felt trapped in a haze all day, thinking of clues she could not chase and staring blankly at the walls. The baby kicked inside her, and she tried to believe things would work out. The knocking grew louder, more urgent. What if it was Dorothea, sent by Grant to check on his supposedly unstable wife? But Vivian was an FBI agent. She did not hide. Through the peephole, she saw Carolyn Hartwell. It was Preston's wife, a woman who had said almost nothing to Vivian at family dinners for 3 years. She was the woman with vacant eyes who always smiled at the right times and faded into the background. Vivian opened the door. "We have to talk," Carolyn said, her voice suddenly firm and strong. Not about what? Carolyn quickly scanned the street for watching eyes or familiar cars. "Not here. May I come inside?" Vivian paused, then moved aside to let her in. Carolyn looked like she belonged in a high-end magazine, with her designer coat buttoned up and her blonde hair in a flawless ponytail. But her hands trembled. Vivian offered her coffee, and they sat at the kitchen table where her entire world had recently collapsed. Carolyn warmed her shaking hands on the mug, but did not drink. "I believe you," she said. Vivian's heart skipped a beat. What? About Dorothea and the poison? All of it? Carolyn's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained solid. "I believe you." Those words were a lifeline Vivian had desperately wished for all week. She had dreamed someone would finally see the truth and stand with her. She just never thought that person would be Carolyn. "Why do you believe me?" Vivian asked. Carolyn's composure finally broke as a tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away with frustration. "Because she did the same thing to me." The story she had held in for 5 long years finally rushed out. "Preston and I were expecting a baby in 2019, Carolyn explained, her voice robotic. "We had only been married for 2 years, and Dorothea did not approve. She never said so directly, of course. Instead, she made comments about how young we were and how a baby would ruin Preston's career." Vivian understood completely. She had heard those same kinds of remarks for years. "I was 12 weeks pregnant when I started feeling terribly sick," Carolyn said. "It was far worse than normal morning sickness. I lost the baby at 14 weeks, she whispered, her voice cracking. The doctors had no explanation. Just 2 weeks earlier, the ultrasound had shown a healthy, strong heartbeat. Then, just like that, it was over. 3 days after, I found a smoothie container while cleaning out the refrigerator. I used to make a protein smoothie every morning, and Dorothea always praised my discipline. This container was nearly empty but something about the residue at the bottom made me stop. I should have just thrown it out, but I had a strange feeling. It had a sweet, chemical smell, almost like antifreeze. Vivian froze. I kept it, Carolyn confessed. I told myself I was just paranoid from the grief. Preston thought so too. When I tried to tell him, he dismissed my fears, just like Grant is dismissing yours. He said his mother would never do such a thing, and that I needed to see someone for my anxiety. But I knew. I just wanted to believe that my mother-in-law had not killed her own grandchild. She pulled a Ziploc bag from her purse. Inside was a small smoothie cup. I have carried this with me for 5 years. For 5 years, I have questioned my own sanity while watching Dorothea act like the perfect grandmother, Carolyn said. All that time, I knew the truth, but was too scared to speak. Vivian took the bag with trembling hands. Have you had it tested? No. I was too afraid of what it would prove, and what that would do to my life. And now, Carolyn looked up. The timid woman gone, replaced by a survivor. Now, she said, I want to help you take her down. They spent the next 3 hours comparing their evidence. Carolyn had more than the container. She had photos and a journal filled with every suspicious comment Dorothea had ever made. We have not been able to have another baby, Carolyn said, her voice empty. 5 years and 3 rounds of IVF have all failed. The doctors find nothing wrong, but I think she permanently damaged something inside me that day. She took more than my baby. She took away my chance to ever be a mother. Vivian reached out and squeezed her hand. We will stop her, she promised. Together? But how? Carolyn asked. She is a Hartwell. She is untouchable. No one is untouchable, Vivian said with certainty. As an FBI agent, I know how to build a case that cannot be broken. The Bureau placed me on leave, but they have not fired me. When I show them proof that Dorothea is a serial killer, they will have to listen. A glimmer of hope appeared in Carolyn's eyes, the first Vivian had ever seen. What do you need from me? She asked. Vivian replied, I need everything you have, the container, the photos, and the journal. And I need your help finding other victims. There must be more people Dorothea hurt who never understood why. We need to build a case so strong that no one can ignore it. A genuine smile finally spread across Carolyn's face. I already have a list. That evening, for the first time in a week, Vivian did not feel so alone. She sat in the nursery with the smoothie container. The proof she was not crazy. The baby kicked, and she pressed her hand to her stomach. We are going to be okay, she whispered. We have help now. Hope finally arrived for Vivian in a phone call from her colleague Margot. She had uncovered a 40-year-old injustice. A buried witness statement from 1987. The witness, a housekeeper named Eleanor Mitchell, saw something suspicious right before Dorothea's first husband died. Margot's voice was electric. The best part? Eleanor is 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and ready to finally tell her story. Vivian was ready to drive straight to Florida, but Margot insisted on a safer video call, given that Vivian was pregnant. The call connected that afternoon at 2:15. On the screen appeared Eleanor Mitchell, an elderly woman with piercing blue eyes. Her voice was surprisingly strong when she spoke. She knew exactly who Vivian was and why she was calling. Eleanor confessed she had been tracking the Hartwell family for 40 years, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. She worked for them for 7 years, starting in 1981. Her voice softened as she painted a picture of Richard Hartwell as a kind and generous man. He treated his staff with respect and even helped pay for her daughter's college tuition. Dorothea, however, was another story. Eleanor described her as cold and calculating, with a smile that never reached her eyes. The turning point came one morning around 4:15. a week before Richard died. Eleanor let herself into the dark kitchen to get her glasses and saw something she would never forget. Dorothea, in her robe, holding a small, unlabeled bottle. She was carefully pouring a greenish liquid into Richard's coffee maker. Eleanor watched, horrified, as Dorothea measured each drop. She slipped away unnoticed, trying to convince herself she had misunderstood. But in the days that followed, she watched as Richard suddenly grew weak and confused. His kidneys began to fail, and soon he was gone. After his death, Eleanor went straight to the police. The detective took her statement, but nothing happened. Soon after, the detective retired and the case was closed. Then, Dorothea fired Eleanor, giving her a look that said she knew everything. A threatening letter from the Hartwell family lawyers made the message perfectly clear. She was to remain silent forever. But Eleanor revealed she never truly stayed quiet. For 40 years, she kept a secret journal, a detailed chronicle of every suspicious death connected to Dorothea. She held it up, showing pages filled with clippings and handwritten notes. She listed other victims, a brother-in-law, in 1994, a board member named David Porter in 2003, and even young women who dated Dorothea's sons. With tears in her eyes, Eleanor said she had prayed for this day and would testify without hesitation. After the call, Margot phoned with more damning evidence. She had found financial records showing Dorothea benefited from the other deaths Eleanor described. There was a $300,000 insurance policy and a $50,000 loan. The motive was suddenly clear: money and power. Another victim, David Porter, was blocking a $5 million real estate deal. Vivian knew they had to go to their boss, Kincaid. Margot hesitated, knowing the enormous risk to her career if they were wrong. But Vivian insisted, saying they owed it to Eleanor to at least try. Margot agreed to present the evidence. That very night, Vivian's phone rang. It was Agent Kincaid. His voice was serious. He had seen everything and was ready to act. The witness statement from 87, the journal, the pattern analysis, the financial connections, he paused. It is compelling. Yes, sir. I am clearing you for limited duty on Monday morning. Be in my office at 8. We are going to review everything. Vivian felt a wave of relief wash over her. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me yet. This could still explode in our faces. But if there is even a small chance that someone has gotten away with murder for 40 years. There is, sir. I am sure of it. Then let us go catch her. The line went dead. Vivian sat in the dark, surrounded by evidence of hidden crimes. When her boss said, "You were right," she felt no satisfaction. Being right did not undo the harm or bring back the dead. It did not fix her marriage or give Carolyn back her child. It only gave her a mission. For 37 years, a monster hid in plain sight, protected by wealth and power. Getting anyone to believe that Dorothea Hartwell was a killer was nearly impossible, even for a pregnant Federal Bureau of Investigation agent who happened to be her daughter-in-law. But after weeks of fighting, the warrants were signed. The graves of her past husbands were opened. On December 15th, the lab confirmed it. Richard Hartwell, James Manning, David Porter, all poisoned. The evidence was finally undeniable. 3 confirmed murders and 1 attempted murder, all pointing to one woman. The warrant for her arrest was signed on December 23rd. Kincaid called Vivian into his office. His voice was heavy. "We have enough," he said. "It is time." The plan was bold, designed for maximum impact. They would move on Christmas Eve, during Dorothea's exclusive annual party at her grand estate. He said it was the best time to catch her, with nowhere to hide, to let all her powerful friends see the truth. I need to be there, Vivian insisted. I started this. Kincaid studied her for a moment, then nodded. Be at the estate at 7:30. We go in at 8. Grant called that afternoon, his first real call in 3 weeks. His voice was broken. Viv, they are saying Mom is being arrested for murder. It cannot be true. Standing in the empty house they once shared, she felt a strange calm. It is true, Grant. The evidence is overwhelming. A heavy silence filled the line before he finally cracked. I should have believed you. Vivian thought of all the nights she had waited for him to choose her. Not tonight, she said softly, and hung up the phone. By 7:45 that evening, the Hartwell estate was shining with holiday lights as luxury cars arrived. Inside, a string quartet played for 50 of the state's most elite guests. None of them had any idea what was coming. Vivian stood at the edge of the property, her Federal Bureau of Investigation badge clipped to her belt. Her partner, Margot, touched her arm. Are you ready for this? Vivian felt the baby kick. I have been ready since Thanksgiving. They walked toward the front doors. As they opened, the sounds of laughter and music spilled out. When Vivian entered with 6 federal agents behind her, the entire room fell silent. Dorothea Hartwell stood by a massive Christmas tree, the picture of 61 years of wealth and elegance in a red velvet dress. When her eyes met Vivian's and saw the badges, she understood. The champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Vivian's voice cut through the silence, clear and steady. Dorothea Hartwell, you are under arrest for the murders of Richard Hartwell, James Manning, and David Porter. You are also under arrest for attempted murder. Gasps echoed through the room as guests stared in disbelief. Dorothea's face twisted from shock into pure fury. This is absurd, she hissed, her voice like ice. I will have your career for this. I will destroy you. Vivian stepped forward. We have the lab results from the gravy you served me at Thanksgiving. We have toxicology reports from 3 exhumed bodies and witness testimony. Dorothea laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. Witness testimony? From who? Vivian let the name hang in the air. From Eleanor Mitchell, your former housekeeper. She saw everything you did to your first husband. For the first time, real fear flashed in Dorothea's eyes. Do not touch me, Dorothea shrieked, as 2 agents moved in with handcuffs. Do you know who I am? Her perfect composure finally shattered. I am Dorothea Hartwell. I own this town. Vivian's voice remained calm. You can explain that to a judge. The handcuffs clicked shut. A raw scream of disbelief tore from Dorothea's throat. She spun toward Vivian, her face contorted with hate. You think you have won? I will be out by morning, and then I will come for you and that baby. Kincaid stepped in. Get her out of here. As agents led her away, still screaming threats, Vivian watched her go. She did not feel victory, only a profound sense of exhaustion. The party guests fled, leaving behind the silent mansion and its twinkling lights. The magic of the evening was gone. Alone in the library, Vivian looked at the beautiful Christmas tree. She found an ornament with Grant's name on it, from when he was 5 years old, the year his father died. There were no ornaments for wives or grandchildren. In Dorothea's world, only the Hartwell sons ever truly mattered. But tonight, that world had ended. The trial began in March. Dorothea Hartwell pleaded not guilty, backed by a team of the best lawyers money could buy. They tried to argue that the evidence was unreliable, but the truth was simply too strong. Dr. Lydia Brennan testified for 3 hours explaining the science. She detailed how lethal doses of ethylene glycol were found in the bone marrow of the victims a fact that had no innocent explanation. Next, Eleanor Mitchell, now 83 years old, took the stand. Her voice was steady as she recalled watching Dorothea poison her own husband's coffee 40 years before. Then Caroline testified through tears about how Dorothea caused her miscarriage. The defense lawyers tried to paint them as confused or bitter, but the women held their ground. And finally, it was Vivian's turn to face her monster-in-law and tell the world the truth. The defense attorney called her a liar, a hormonal pregnant woman using her rape for personal revenge. For 6 hours, Vivian calmly presented the facts. She told the jury that her mother-in-law, Dorothea, a beloved socialite, was a monster who had tried to kill her and her unborn child. This is a story about what happens when you trust your gut, even when the world tells you that you are crazy. If you have ever been in that position, stick with me. The jury was out for 3 long days. Vivian spent that time with her newborn daughter, Elise, who had been born just 2 weeks before the trial. She named her after the one friend who had believed her when no one else would. Then the call came. The courtroom was packed. The jury filed in with stone faces. The foreman stood up. On the first count of murder, he said, "We find the defendant guilty." A gasp swept through the room. Then came the next verdict, and the next. Guilty. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Dorothea's mask of elegance finally broke. She stood up and screamed that it was all a conspiracy, that Vivian had poisoned her family against her. The judge banged his gavel, but the celebrated philanthropist showed her true colors, fighting the guards as they tried to restrain her. They dragged her away, screaming. 2 weeks later, the judge handed down her sentence. Life in prison without any chance of parole. Dorothea did not scream this time. She stood tall, a picture of dignity, but as they led her out, her eyes found Vivian. She mouthed the words, "This is not over." Vivian looked right back at her and replied softly, knowing Dorothea could read her lips, "Yes, it is." The trial ended, and they called it justice. But Vivian felt nothing but emptiness. Her friend Margot asked how she was doing, and Vivian honestly did not know. Looking at her sleeping daughter, she admitted it did not feel like winning. Margot wisely said that sometimes justice is just the absence of injustice. Outside the courthouse, her husband Grant looked like a broken man. He was wrecked by the revelation that his mother was a serial killer and his whole life had been a lie. Grant's voice cracked as he apologized for not believing her from the start. He admitted he was blind because he never wanted to see the monster his mother truly was. He took a step forward, asking if they could try to be a family again. Vivian looked at the man who chose his manipulative mother over her and their unborn child. She remembered the terrifying nights she spent alone while he stayed with the very woman trying to harm her, and her answer was a quiet, final no. She explained that the woman he married, the one who trusted him completely, was gone forever. Grant's face crumpled as she reminded him of how he had called her delusional and left her alone and pregnant. Vivian gently told him that while he was not evil like his mother, he was weak. She said he could not be the man she needed until he learned to be strong on his own, without his mother's control. 6 months later, Vivian had built a new life. Her new apartment was smaller, but it was entirely her own. A peaceful space filled with photos of her daughter, Elise, and the friends who had saved her. The sage green walls in the nursery felt like a fresh start. The divorce was final, and Grant had moved away to start therapy. He was trying to be a better father from a distance, and for that, she was grateful. One Tuesday, her boss, Agent Kincaid, called her into his office. After asking about the baby, he slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion to supervisory special agent, making her the youngest in the division. He told her she had earned it. The case against Dorothea had uncovered 4 other cold cases, saving lives both past and future. Vivian stared at the paperwork, a dream she had worked for her entire career. Vivian accepted the promotion with one condition. She wanted to build a special task force. It would focus on the invisible crimes, like domestic poisoning, that often slip through the cracks. These were the cases with victims nobody believed, and powerful perpetrators who knew how to hide their tracks. Kincaid listened carefully and then told her to write the proposal. He would take it straight to the director. Someone needed to see these victims, and she was the one to do it. A year after her life fell apart, Vivian's work was thriving. Dorothea was in prison for life, and the evil dynasty was finished. Vivian's task force was approved, and she now led a team fighting for the voiceless. On Thanksgiving Day, her apartment was filled not with obligation, but with love. 12 people sat around her table, a true family of friends who had stood by her. The table was filled with laughter and warmth. Her daughter Elise, now 14 months old, was happily making a mess with her mashed potatoes. Vivian looked at all the smiling faces. There was her friend Caroline, now pregnant and happily remarried, and Eleanor Mitchell, who had helped save her life. There were friends from her support group and doctors who had become trusted allies. Vivian raised her glass. She explained that a year ago, she thought family meant blood and marriage. Now she knew she was wrong. Family, she said, is the people who believe you, who stand with you, and who fight alongside you. She gave a toast to the people who saved her, to her beautiful daughter who made her brave, and to second chances. As glasses clinked, laughter filled the room, and Vivian finally felt whole again. In the courthouse hallway, Vivian looked at her reflection. She was no longer the scared woman from a year ago who was waiting for a hero. She realized she never needed anyone to save her. She just needed to trust herself. Later that night, she stood over her daughter's crib and whispered a promise. She promised that Elise would always know her own worth and believe in her own instincts. She promised that her daughter would be strong and brave and would fight back with everything she had if anyone ever tried to hurt her. The baby sighed peacefully in her sleep. Vivian knew there was more work to do, but for that one night, everything was finally okay. This story proves that the most dangerous monsters are sometimes the ones who wear pearls and serve you poison with a smile. This story proves one powerful truth. The most dangerous monsters don't look like monsters. They wear pearls, host holiday dinners, and serve you poison with a smile. The lesson? Trust your instincts. Your gut feeling exists for a reason. When something feels wrong, don't let anyone, not even the people closest to you, convince you that you're crazy. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment when your gut was screaming that something was wrong, but everyone else dismissed you? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button so I know you want more stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their instincts matter. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap that notification bell. I bring you new stories every single week. Remember, trust yourself. You are stronger than you know. See you in the next one. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful stories with valuable life lessons.